Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to the 400 Mini Show, an exploration of the games available for the Atari 8-bit line of home computers. Today's game is Preppie 2, a 1983 release from Adventure International, developed by Russ Wetmore. As the name suggests, it's a follow-up to Wetmore's earlier game Preppie from the previous year. While the original Preppie paid homage to the classic Frogger, Preppie 2 features a markedly different gameplay style, unfolding as a maze chase game. Like the original Preppie, Preppie 2 is an Atari 8-bit exclusive. The original Preppie was designed at least partly as a showcase of the Atari 8-bit's colour capabilities, and while Preppie 2 might look like it's a little bit less colourful by nature of its screen designs, it is still a good demonstration of what the platform can offer. Reviews were positive. Writing in the July 1984 issue of the New Zealand magazine Bits and Bytes, reviewer Michael Fletcher described the game as a must that utilises the functions of the computer that have made the Atari such a fine games playing machine. He also praised how, despite maze games being really worn out, especially with the numerous Pac-Man variations out for the Atari home computers, Preppie 2 is really a surprisingly different maze program. In the September 1983 issue of Electronic Games, regular contributors Bill Kunkel and Arnie Katz noted that the graphics in Preppie 2 are no more spectacular than in Preppie. Of course, that's like saying the special effects in George Lucas's greatest movie are no more spectacular than Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. They also praised the continuous musical score, this time featuring the songs After You've Gone and Mary, though I'll have to take their word for it on that latter one, since a song just called Mary is one of the most ungooglable things I've ever encountered. They concluded that Preppie 2 is what computer arcading is all about. This game was a personal favourite of mine growing up, though these days I think I might slightly prefer the original Preppie. It's still a good time for your Atari 8-bit though, so let's go play Preppie 2. Okay, here we are with Preppie 2 by Russ Wetmore for Star System Software Incorporated. Now, before we start playing today, I would like to read you a story, because there's a rather fun narrative setup to this game in the original manual that I didn't have the time or opportunity to show you in the introduction sequence. But before we start playing today, I would like to read it to you. Now, it's quite lengthy, so I'll put a timestamp in the description and a chapter mark, so if you want to skip this and go straight to the gameplay, you can do. I also don't have any visual aids, so you'll just have to sit and stare at the Preppie 2 title screen while I read this, but I'm sure you'll survive. Anyway, let us begin with Chapter 1, Aftermath. It was the first Tuesday of the third month of his stay at Hans Jopkins Medical Centre and Transmission Exchange, when Wadsworth Overcash's thoughts returned to the prospect of re-entering academic life. In the aftermath of the terrible events that the world had come to know as the Nasty Nine, both Wadsworth and the grisly groundskeeper had seemingly vanished from the face of the planet. Of course, this was not the case. For the record, the former had spent 3 quiet months in seclusion recuperating from the injuries inflicted by the latter. As for the groundskeeper, he had quietly skipped town, leaving behind only a for sale sign planted aside the Nasty Nine clubhouse and several unanswered questions. It had certainly not been a fun summer. Drummed out of Cape Cod University, shunned by his peers, disowned by his family for his inability to execute his duties on the Nasty Nine, Wadsworth was almost thankful for the lengthy convalescence required to heal the wounds inflicted by the mad science of the prepster-hating groundskeeper. But the scent of autumn was on the wind, offering promises of change, promises of renewal of the spirit and the body. Ah yes, the body. In essence, Wadsworth's appearance was that of an electric mummy. Save for a couple of eye openings, a slit for a mouth, and the necessary entrances for various tubes and catheters, Wadsworth Overcash was a rigid Pillsbury doughboy housed in an oxygen tent, double-checked with an oxygen mask, and plugged into a blipping ECG. True, the body cast would come off in less than a week, and he'd be good as new. But for the nonce, the experience was considerably less than pleasant. It was a terrible thing to have itches you couldn't scratch. No matter, the important thing was that the groundskeeper and the Nasty Nine were many miles away from Wadsworth's present location deep within the woodsy wilds of Vermont. This much he knew. He would not lay eyes on the smug countenance of the portly groundskeeper again. It was time to shed the fears and mistakes of the past, and to strive for academic and social resurrection. But where was there an Ivy League school to be found in this Boston-forsaken wilderness? Suddenly, his thoughts were clipped by an explosive thud and the sounds of splintering wood. A staff nurse, firm of jaw and great of girth, had kicked the door open to his private room with such force that the door separated from its hinges and crashed into a pushcart containing Wadsworth's untouched breakfast tray. In a great culinary shower, the tray's contents rained onto both oxygen tent and patient. "You's got a visitor, Overcash." "I'm very sorry," the nurse calmly announced in a voice that would not have been out of place in a remedial reading lab. She bidded entrance with an exaggerated sweeping gesture to someone who was apparently standing just out of sight in the hospital corridor. "Entrez-vous, creep. 5 minutes, no more." The chunky nurse clumped out of the room, only to be replaced by an even stranger sight. A tall, gangly youth who couldn't have possibly tipped the scales at an ounce more than 90 pounds grinned in at him. His height was striking, 6'6" if an inch, Wadsworth figured. He strode into Wadsworth's room on heron-like legs, covering the distance in a couple of great steps. "Hoo-hoo, what a sweetie pie," the lanky youth opined, thrusting a 4-inch thumb in the direction of the corridor. He quickly offered a spindly hand to Wadsworth. Wadsworth inquired, the oxygen mask muffling his words, his stick-stiff arm going nowhere. The lanky youth ignored Wadsworth's mobility and instead pumped the Prep's protruding thumb, perhaps the only part of Wadsworth's entire being that was not cut, contused, bandaged or broken. "Yeah, Swizzle. From Swizzlestick. Never really liked it. I ain't that tall, don't you know, but it kinda stuck." Wadsworth eyed the youth as Swizzle turned his attention to the ward. Wadsworth's room was varied, to say the least. To say the most, it was downright bizarre. The medical equipment did not inspire confidence. It had a decidedly second-hand look to it. Swizzle didn't find the equipment's condition particularly interesting. However, the spinning hamster-powered treadmill wired to Wadsworth's ECG did earn a second take. The bathroom door sported a yellow out-of-order sign. A section of transmission linkage drained in a nearby sink. On a small bedside table, a vase of weedy-looking plants drooped. Swizzle seemed fascinated by everything, examining each item of interest in turn, even the elaborate stinkweed arrangement that had been sent to Wadsworth by some anonymous non-friend. Wadsworth quickly noticed that the lanky youth's attire was as outrageous as its owner. A full 90% of his frame was draped with an oversized, faded sweatshirt that hung loosely about his ankles. His feet were shod with 2 dissimilar shoes, one a Nike track style, the other a two-tone formal. In between, frayed, paint-flecked Levi's peeped out from under the sweatshirt. "Nice digs," Swizzle observed. He settled into a rusty metal folding chair and faced Wadsworth. "Smoke?" he offered, producing both cigarette and lighter in a single gesture. Wadsworth bubbled, wishing that he could point to the danger no smoking oxygen in use sign which hung on the wall over his bed. Swizzle looked puzzled for a moment, then broke into a large grin. "Oh, a menthol man, huh? No problem. Go on right here." Swizzle probed a rear pocket, quickly locating the object of his search. "Here, bud." He lifted the flap to the oxygen tent and poked the cigarette under Wadsworth's mask and into his mouth slit. Fizzed Wadsworth as the cigarette plugged his protests. Swizzle applied a thumb to the wheel of a cherry-red Bic lighter. Click, click, click. Wadsworth's eyes enlarged to the size of silver dollars when a few sparks leapt from the flint, but the lighter did not ignite. Click, click. "Drat!" Swizzle finally exclaimed, tossing the lighter into a nearby wastebasket. "And brand new too. But not to worry, old Swizzle comes fully equipped at all times and for every occasion." He fished into his Levi's and located a book of stick matches. "Here we go," he said, tearing a match from the pack and applying it to the striker. Panicking, Wadsworth inhaled. Hard. The cigarette made an odd schlooping sound as it disappeared into his mouth slit and down his windpipe, eventually coming to rest in his left lung. Swizzle stared at Wadsworth incredulously for a moment and then shook his own head in self-correction. "Of course, how silly of me. Swizzle chuckled as the authoritative red lettering of the no smoking sign caught his eye. Pure oxygen and fire don't mix none too good, huh? The match joined the lighter in the wastebasket. Well, we'll fix that little problem. Locating a quietly hissing valve labelled oxygen that was adjacent to Wadsworth's bed, Swizzle racked it counterclockwise and returned to the conversation. Anyway, let's forget the cigs and get down to snuff. I'm Rush, chairman for the greatest fraternity on the entire East Coast, Delta Skelter Omega, out at Acme College. Swizzle paused to flick away a bit of egg that had slid off the oxygen tent and onto his leg. We've done some checking on you, Overcash, and we think you might be the kind of material that DSO needs, don't you know? He eyed the prone prepster intently, awaiting a response. Hmm? Darn oxygen mask. Yes, my boy, you! Swizzle's voice rose as though he were about to commence a speech that would do F. Lee Bailey proud. We know about you, Overcash. You flubbed at Cape Cod, you, but there are those here who admire your efforts in the face of, shall we say, a most unpleasant task. A task that has reduced lesser men to so much chocolate pudding, including some of our current members. Swizzle leapt from the chair and began to hop about the room. The emotional flames were being quickly fanned now. Wadsworth was burning with the knowledge that others in this distant fraternity had somehow heard of him and sympathised with his recent ordeal. Swizzle was heating up too, but more with the appreciation of his own oratory than the meaning of his words. There's a place for you here, with us, he summarised, retrieving some of his former composure. He settled back into the chair. Interested? Literally the answer to my prayers, Wadsworth thought. He would inspect this fraternity, this Acme College, and, if it met with his approval, shake off the past and return to university life as a respected fraternity man. Wadsworth tried to nod, but found that his full body cast would not permit the luxury of movement. He finally gurgled, tasting tobacco, and hoping that his eyes would convey his true feelings. They did. Swizzle's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Fan-ultratastic! You're gonna like it here at Acme! Swizzle again bounded from the bedside chair, unaware that his knee had brushed the oxygen flow valve, closing it completely. I'll be back to get you, Overcash, after the cast comes off, Natch. Swizzle thumped Wadsworth's cast-covered head with an index finger in a playful parting gesture that, at least to Wadsworth, perfectly replicated the sound of a baseball bat slamming against the garbage can. The discomfort made Wadsworth involuntarily gasp. There was, however, no air to gasp. Ruined that line, didn't I? There was, however, no air to gasp. With a curt ta-ta, Swizzle's lanky form covered the distance twixt bed and doorway in an instant and vanished into the corridor, completely oblivious to Wadsworth, whose oxygen-light face was now powder blue. No sooner had Swizzle departed, the chunky nurse returned spewing venom. Creep! He was here for 6 minutes. If I wouldn't have got held up in maternity, I'd have ejected his butt personally. She examined Wadsworth, whose eyes were now protruding through the cast openings as though they were on stalks. Said oxygen-starved Wadsworth. Hungry already, eh, jerko? She cooed mockingly, enjoying his torment. I warned you to eat your breakfast. She collected his fallen breakfast tray and headed towards the door, a little soupy trail of grease mopping her steps. Next to the ECG monitor, the hamster furiously worked its treadmill. Well, you'll have to wait till supper now, exclaimed Wadsworth as he twisted and thrashed the only part of his body that would twist or thrash, his thumb. It didn't take an MD to explain to Wadsworth that the sharp crack he heard next was that of his thumb dislocating. There's more. Chapter 2. Initiation. Even now, it was difficult for Wadsworth Overcash to believe. Only a week before, he had been extracted from his cocoon-like body cast, presented with a bill of astronomical proportions. No, Mr. Overcash, that is not our phone number at the bottom of your statement, that's the amount you owe. And released from Hans Jopkins. The feeling of freedom filled him with an intense, boundless exhilaration. It was almost like being reborn. On that happy Saturday, Swizzle had been waiting for him at the hospital entrance. Faster than you can say, Yale is swell! Wadsworth was rushed to Acme College and introduced to his new living quarters, a cheerless, cramped dormitory on the south end of the campus. By nightfall, it began. The it, of course, was Heck Week. Heck Week, That warm, friendly period when fraternity brothers get to know the new pledges intimately through a series of grueling hazing routines was without a doubt the bane of all young men aspiring to be good fraternal life. Over the course of the next 6 days, Wadsworth was subjected to nearly every mental and physical harassment possible, including being hoisted up the campus flagpole and left overnight. But true to his breeding, he took everything that his soon-to-be fraternity brothers could toss his way and had bounced back shining. Finally, it was over. Saturday night was here, the night of his initiation into Delta Skelter Omega. So great was Wadsworth's excitement that he giggled nervously while Swizzle and 3 DSO brothers bagged him like last week's leftovers and stuffed him into the too small trunk of Swizzle's 63 Nova for the trip to the site of the initiation. "Almost time, kid, don't you know?" Swizzle announced as he thumped Wadsworth's head through the bag with an index finger and slammed the trunk lid shut. With a wheeze, the Nova groaned down the driveway and off into the night. Wadsworth was now in transit to Lord knows where for the ritual initiation, his burlap-covered nose grinding against an oily 2-ply radial. But there was some comfort to be derived from the knowledge that within mere hours, maybe less, the initiation would be over, and Wadsworth Overcash would be a full-fledged DSO. The excitement was almost more than he could bear. Wait till Mummy and Daddy find out. Maybe then they would forgive him for his embarrassing showing at the Nasty Nine. For the first time, his thoughts turned to the nature of the initiation itself. What would it be like? Being a secret initiation, no one who had been through it was talking. Still, he wasn't too worried. A DSO brother had confided that the rough stuff was already over. The actual initiation was a very heady affair and laden with much pomp and ceremony. Relax and enjoy the ride, he told himself, as he and the oily radial bounced about in rhythm to a string of potholes Swizzle's Nova was passing over. Shortly, the car chugged to a stop. Wadsworth heard the trunk lid open and felt strong hands hoist him out of the trunk and into the cool night air. Heels clacked against concrete, doors opened and closed. A faint smell of chemicals and the distant echoes of the group's movements gave Wadsworth the subtle sensation of passing deep into a large building of some sort. After being carried for a considerable time, he was unceremoniously deposited onto a rather hard floor. The clacking heels and sounds of motion faded into the distance. A door crashed shut with a finality it told Wadsworth he was quite alone. For several minutes, Wadsworth sat quietly in the darkness, unsure what to do next. He was beginning to perspire now, and a general feeling of uneasiness was rapidly replacing his former feelings of anticipation. Just as he fidgeted to claw at an itch on his back, a metallic voice crackled to life through what must have been at least 20 oversized speakers. "You may leave the bag now, Mr. Overcash." The voice was raspy, emotionless. Wadsworth didn't know to whom it belonged, but it most definitely was not Swizzle's. All the same, he groped for and found an opening in the bag. With a grunt, he pulled the bag from around him, and quickly wished that he hadn't. Wadsworth could now see that he had been placed in a vast enclosed area, apparently a deserted warehouse. Several key lights were suspended dozens of feet above, spotlighting him in a small pool of light in a sea of inky blackness. He started to speak, but the metallic voice quickly cut him off. "Should old acquaintance be forgot, Lacoste Spawn?" it taunted. "Incidentally, welcome to your demise." Despair rushed in upon Wadsworth like a summer monsoon. There was no mistaking that voice now. But not here. Not in Vermont. How could it be? Almost in answer to his unvoiced question, a large panel directly in front of Wadsworth began to part, slowly exposing a lighted booth. Silhouetted against a sophisticated array of flashing panels was a hulking shape that could belong to no other. The groundskeeper. "Surprised, eh?" The man mountain boomed into a hanging microphone. "Don't be. We've been keeping an eye on you since you left our..." He paused to select an appropriate word. "Care." Wadsworth was positively livid with fear. He tried to stand, but the rubbery things that used to be his legs would not hear of it. The groundskeeper continued. "I'm going to keep this short and tasty, Overcash. Your unknowing frat buddies have been the first to test my latest and greatest creation, the Supermaze." He paused to check a small monitor. "Ha! Your last pal just bit the big one. It's your turn now. 3 mazes, no waiting. And don't even think of being a hero. My control is complete. The groundskeeper searched for a button and stabbed it with a sausage-like finger. Circuits snapped and crackled. Instantly, Wadsworth was jolted to a standing position. The groundskeeper then grabbed a strange handle-like device that protruded from a control panel and shoved it forward. It looked suspiciously like a joystick. In direct response to the groundskeeper's action, the terrified prepster lurched forward, his legs answering to a will other than Wadsworth. Do you like my toy, Preppie? The groundskeeper questioned, seething. It's the latest thing from Felons Are Us. Horrified, Wadsworth realised that the groundskeeper had somehow taken control of his reflexes. It was now time to start worrying. Peals of hideous laughter reverberated throughout the building. The voice spoke again. Do you like to paint, Preppie? Was the only response Wadsworth could muster. Excellent, excellent, replied the amplified voice of the groundskeeper. We're confident of your abilities. The groundskeeper shoved the joystickish device to the 3 o'clock position with his right hand and poked a blinking button with his left. In response, Wadsworth felt himself yanked to the right and directed from the pool of light into the darkness. Above, a small spotlight flared to life, illuminating a rather secure-looking metal door that was beginning to rise directly before him. Just as Wadsworth thought he would pass through, he was jerked to an abrupt stop. To his right, several open buckets of paint and a paint roller rested on a small pedestal. Helplessly, he watched his hands scoop up a bucket labelled Madras Pink and a paint-spattered roller. Is this what they meant by losing control? Wadsworth wondered. What could be worse? Then he heard the sounds. Wet, squishy noises of something slimy and amphibious mindlessly flopping about around the corner, just out of sight. And that wasn't the bad part. It sounded like there was more than one of whatever was making those unsettling sounds. Somewhere behind him, the filtered laughter began anew. Paint, Wadsworth Overcash, the groundskeeper chortled, leaning into the joystick with all 500 pounds of his bulk. Paint for your very life. With an involuntary lurch, Wadsworth was thrown through the open doorway. The door fell shut behind him with sickening finality. Immediately, the wet, squishy noises stopped. But only for a moment. Right. God, that went on for a while, didn't it? Yeah, like I say, I will put a chapter mark at the end of that. So if you do want to skip it, you can do. But I thought that was worth sharing because a lot of the reviews of Preppie 2 when it first came out specifically praised that narrative setup. And yes, it is ridiculously and overly elaborate for what is essentially a maze chase game. But yeah, it certainly has a certain something to the experience. Anyway, we're actually going to start playing now, and hopefully it will disable the attract mode while we're doing that. Right, let's begin. There we go. Yeah, so if you're not familiar, I have explained this before, but if you leave an Atari 8-bit for a certain amount of time, it will start cycling around colours. It was supposed to be like an anti-screen burn thing. It was an early screensaver, basically. Most games have a routine in them that resets the timer for that attract mode because it's not possible to turn it off completely. And it's good to see that Preppie 2 actually implements that correctly, because there's a surprising number of commercial releases that made it out that didn't turn off the attract mode when you started using the joystick, because normally you disable it by either poking a value into memory or pressing a key on the keyboard. So normally just pushing a direction on the joystick or the fire button doesn't disable it, but they haven't implemented it. Anyway, that's not very interesting, so let's talk about this game. It is a maze chase game, as you can see. We are Wadsworth Overcash. I guess that story implies that we are actually playing as the groundskeeper controlling him, which is a fun little twist. But yeah, anyway, your aim is to paint the various different mazes by walking over every section. And you'll see you get 10 points for each section you paint. You actually get 10 times the level you're on points. So the further you go in the game, the more points you get. Which is nice. And so you see that first screen had the wet, squishy opponents that were teased in that intro text, which are some large radioactive frogs, apparently. And then this second screen here, this is a connection back to Wadsworth's previous experiences on the Nasty 9 golf course, which of course was the original Preppie. And so what we have here, if you're having trouble making out what those are, because I used to have terrible trouble actually sort of figuring out what these things are actually supposed to represent. The things moving to the right are dudes pushing like a manual lawnmower, a sort of roller type lawnmower. And then the things moving from right to left, those are golf carts presented from above. When I was a kid, I could not avoid associating the golf carts with electric drills, because my dad had a drill. Oops, we're dead. Yeah, my dad had an electric drill that I thought looked like those golf carts, and so I have the unavoidable association in my head of them being drills rather than golf carts. And you'll see that different ones move at different speeds, and they don't alternate. When one leaves the screen, it picks randomly whether it's going to be another lawnmower or a golf cart. So you've got to be very careful when you're around the outside edges of the screen, because stuff can and will spawn on top of you. Now you may have noticed back in that first screen where we were dealing with the frogs, Wadsworth has a cloak ability. And the amount of time he can use that cloak is reflected by that bar at the bottom of the screen. So to use the cloak, you hold down the fire button, and Wadsworth turns invisible while you're holding the fire button. While he's invisible, he's also invincible. So here, for example, I can sneak past that frog and do that. You've got to be very careful, because when you are cloaked, you have no indication of where you actually are on the screen, aside from the paint you leave. So if you're cloaking yourself over an area that you've already painted, you better have a really good feel for how quickly Wadsworth moves, because otherwise you may find yourself uncloaking right on top of an unpleasant enemy, which no one wants. Oh, walk right into that one. I am a fool. And there we have the traditional 8-bit You're Dead music, which, if you were curious, is actually I think it's the third movement from a Chopin piano sonata. So it's broadly known to most people as the Funeral March, but it's not actually called that. Like I say, it's just the third movement from this Chopin piano sonata. And the tempo instruction is March Funerare, or however you pronounce that in Italian. Funere. I don't know. Anyway, the tempo marking basically translates to Funeral March. So, damn it. It translates to Funeral March, and so the piece itself has become known as the Funeral March. But it's in that funny situation where it became so cliched. It became so cliched that if you heard it at an actual funeral, it would feel like it was in slightly bad taste. Alright, let's have another go. And let's try and do it a bit better this time. Yeah, the other features you got here, you see these mazes have these turnstiles that you can walk through. And you can use that to sort of block off parts of the maze. And help you get around the frogs. But yeah, succeeding in this game is about sort of trying to manage the behaviour of the enemies as much as you can. If you can get them all bunched up in one part of the maze and then go and paint the other half of it, then that's a good approach. Another thing you can do is you can wander off the screen and go back to it, and you see that resets the positions of them all. And so it's actually very helpful to do that sometimes, so you don't necessarily have to clear one screen at a time. You can use that reset mechanic to make life a little bit more manageable for yourself. And combine that with the cloak. And there you go. Job is, as they say, a good one. Right, we now have a slight issue with the frog blocking off the exit. But this is what I mean by try and bunch them up if you can. That's it, and you can outwit them, manoeuvre around them, and get into the next screen safely. So this second screen I find interesting because the strategy you have to use is completely different to the first one. So you have no real control over where the things appear and how they move in this one. You just have to kind of risk versus reward it and figure out if you've got time to get to one of those edge spaces before a new thing appears. But yeah, I've always been very fond of this game. When I was a kid, I think I liked this game a little bit more than the first Preppie, because when I first played Preppie, I was already familiar with Frogger, and Preppie's a very good take on the Frogger formula. But oh damn it. Preppie's a very good take on the Frogger formula. In fact, I think in some ways it's better than Frogger. But at the time, I was more excited by stuff that was kind of new and different. And this was new and different. Yes, it's a maze game, but it's not the same as Pac-Man. You're not necessarily being chased by things all the time. And I really like the painting mechanic. There's something satisfying about the screen gradually filling up with this colour that you're painting onto the screen. Oh god, run. Now, I think from today's perspective, I think I might have gone back the other way. I think I might like Preppie 1 a bit more than this. But I don't know, really. It doesn't matter, really, does it? Who cares? They're both good games, and that's all that matters. I think one of the reasons I maybe like Preppie 1 a little bit more, if anything, is that it's a little bit easier. This game starts quite difficult, and it doesn't get any easier. So you'll see we've been playing for quite a while. We're still just on the first level, because each level has these 3 mazes to clear. They always follow the same format. They have the first maze has the frogs, the second maze has the lawnmowers and the golf carts, And then the third maze is back to the frogs again, with a different layout. But that does mean that each level is quite long in terms of what you have to achieve to clear it. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And there we are. We are done with the first level. So we get bonus points for how much cloak you have left. And so if you can try and avoid using the cloak as much as possible, you'll get more points. And then you get a nice little cutscene between every level in a Pac-Man style. Unskippable, I might add. Because this was the age before people just mashed their way through cutscenes, and these little animated sequences like this were still unusual enough that people would want to watch them. They felt like a reward. And I've talked about this a few times previously on various games that we've played, but back in this era of gaming, it was quite easy to make a player feel like they'd been rewarded with something very simple. Like, look, now we're using blue paint. When I was a kid... should have been looking where I was going. When I was a kid, something changing colour in a game was like, gave you like a huge sense of achievement. It was fantastic. it might look and sound silly now, but the fact that you were painting in blue instead of pink now gives this second level an immediately distinctive feel from the first one. And it also tells anyone watching that you've made progress. Oh dear. This is not good, is it? Definitely not good. Ugh. Death. Right, what I am going to do for this next attempt is I'm going to activate the 2-player mode. I'm just going to say 2 players, 1 stick. Because one thing I always really liked about Preppie and Preppie 2 is that although it was take it in turns multiplayer, it actually made player 1 and player 2 feel distinct from one another, and you'll see what that means when we switch between them. So player 1 starts their game with that little jingle there, as usual. And we will just play as normal. Painting, painting. Oh dear. It wasn't intentional, but it allows me to show you what I mean. So if you now listen, player 2's got a different jingle. Not only that, but player 2 has a green shirt instead of a white shirt. Again, little changes like that during this era in gaming felt significant. To such a degree that when I played this game as a kid, I would actually quite often play 2-player games by myself, like I'm doing right now. Just because it let me play as player 2, which is not something you do under normal circumstances. Yes, one might argue that the more socially acceptable route would be to actually play the game with a friend. But as we all know, that's not always something you can rely on. And so it's nice that you could still enjoy that feature by yourself. I know a lot of people who hated being relegated to player 2. I loved it. I loved being player 2 because because of reasons like this. You got to see things that you didn't normally see in the game. So you get to play as Wadsworth Overcash in the green shirt. You get to play as Luigi. You get to be the helicopter in Shadow World. All sorts of things like that. And it's like the colour thing. It feels significant to make enough progress in a game for something to change colour. And like I say, I know that must sound utterly laughable to someone used to modern games and the way they reward you, but we're talking about games that fit into... I can't remember if this was like 16K or 32K or 48K. So certainly no more than 48K. You'll notice there's no loading in this game because the whole thing is in memory. And when you have a game that is completely resident in memory like that, it needs to be able to reward the player in a way that doesn't require any sort of major changes to what's happening. And a simple palette shift is a really easy way to do that. Because that's all it's doing. It's not like a completely new sprite or anything. It's just a palette shift of Wadsworth sprite. With, I think it actually inverts the two colours on his t-shirt. Oops! Because I think the player 1 Wadsworth has a little green spot on a white shirt, whereas player 2 here has a white spot on a green shirt. But with the low resolution that we're running here, that feels significant. That is a significant difference between the two players. Makes them immediately recognisable, makes them stand out, leaves you in no doubt as to whose turn it is. And right now, player 2 is kicking the butt of player 1. Now, as you can probably see, this game is pretty challenging. So getting off the first level is a bit of an achievement in itself. I have made it onto the third level before. I believe there's 4 levels altogether. I've made it onto the third one. But the third one gets really difficult because... oh, damn it. Because like here we've got 4 frogs at the same time. On the third level you have, I think it's 6. And that can make those mazes feel quite crowded quite quickly. Alright, come on player 1, catch up. I've got a sneeze brewing. I apologise in advance if I do it right down the microphone, which is entirely possible. It doesn't want to come out just yet. But it feels imminent. Oh, damn it. Taking too many risks, player 1. Just too many risks. Alright, player 2, come on. Bring us home. Good. Looking tasty. Oh, this could be dangerous. Right, let's hope that frog. That's it. He can come down there. Yep, there we go. Oh, it's another bloody frog. Right, you'll notice when you're cloaked, you don't set the turnstiles off either. So you've really got to kind of get a feel for how fast you move while you're cloaked to know when it's safe to let go of the button. There we go, level 1 down. Beautifully done. And time for cutscene again. And disappointingly, it doesn't have the palette swap for player 2 in the cutscene, which is a shame, but I guess understandable. I'll let them off. Alright, just taking the opportunity for a drink. That was a long story we read out at the beginning. It was like 20 minutes. Didn't realise it was going to take that long. But anyway, it's done now. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you didn't, I hope you enjoyed skipping it. I don't want to hear any complaining in the comments about it being too long, because I gave you the option to skip it. And if you didn't take it, that's on you. That's entirely your fault. Right, as I mentioned earlier, you may notice that if you look at the score, we're now getting 20 points per square painted. So much like the original Preppie, your scoring potential gradually escalated as you played through the game. That's the case here too as well. So it multiplies any points you score by the level that you're on. Uh-oh. There is something quite sinister about those frogs. When you consider they're the size of a human. I always thought they were a nice little homage to the fact that Preppie was regarded as a Frogger clone. Which, I mean, I guess it is. Charitably, we can say it's inspired by Frog. Damn it! I knew that wasn't going to work. But I still did it. Yes, we can charitably say that Preppie 1 was inspired by Frogger. Because it was. It's not ripping it off completely. The setting is different. The concept is different. It just so happens that you're moving up and down a screen avoiding obstacles. But the aspects aside from that are actually quite different from Frogger. You're not trying to get to the top of the screen and then not get back down again. The thing with Preppie is you were collecting things and then bringing them back to the bottom of the screen. Which puts a surprisingly different twist on things. Because in Frogger, you're pretty much always focusing on how you are going to get up the screen. And all the obstacles are designed with getting up the screen in mind. Whereas in Preppie, you go back and forth. Which might sound like a very small difference. But it's surprisingly significant in mechanical terms. Oh, this is an awkward little arrangement, isn't it? Come on, player one. You've got to break 1,000 at least. That's more like it. Sneak that one in. Uh-oh, but... Oh, I hit the bloody button on the controller. Well, that's annoying, isn't it? This is why you should always reset your buttons. Oh dear. Alright, okay, let's have one more go, just one player, and then we'll call it a day. And then I will, in fact, you know what? I'm going to go and unset that button so I don't accidentally press it. So edit, skip. Clear. Right. Okay. One last go. Single player. Off we go. Yes, that's the only unfortunate thing with the joystick that comes with the 400 mini. The buttons on the ring of the controller are a really nice idea, and the fact you can remap them is cool. But with so many games chucking you back to the title screen when you press one of the function keys on the Atari 8-bit, like start select option, that can lead to unfortunate situations like the one we just encountered. But never mind, these things happen. This last run has got a lot to live up to now, hasn't it? This better be the best dang game of Preppie 2 I've ever played. We'll just see. Okay, good. Right, that's what I like to see. Efficient clearing of that first screen. Let's clear out that edge while that thing is over there. Polish up some gaps while we can. There's a definite strategy to this section. It involves figuring out how much time you have to be in front of and behind the various vehicles. And using that opportunity to get in and get those tricky edge pieces. Alright, well, this is all going fairly smoothly so far. Nab them quickly. We should just have time to nab these ones as well. And these ones. Very nice. Okay, let's wait for this one to pass. And we're good. Lovely stuff. Uh-oh. Speedy one. Let him come by. Right, third maze. I always rather like this colour scheme for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. Because, like, brown and pink. it's not pretty. But, I don't know. There was something I always found particularly appealing about this specific maze. You know what I think it is? I've talked previously about having what I assume is a synesthetic reaction to certain things in games that I play. And I think it's something to do with that. I think subconsciously my brain makes the association between the brown walls and the pink paint as being like Neapolitan ice cream, which I'm rather fond of. Is that a thing overseas? I don't know. Neapolitan ice cream, if you're unfamiliar, is ice cream, but it's stripy. So instead of it just being one flavour of ice cream, it has 3 stripes. You have a pink stripe, which is strawberry. You have a yellow stripe, which is vanilla. And you have a brown stripe, which is chocolate. And it's something I inextricably associate with going to visit my grandparents as a kid. Because when I was a kid, every time we went to go and see my grandparents on my mum's side, we would always stay with them. And my grandparents on my dad's side lived just a couple of doors down from them, so we'd go and stay with the one set and go and visit the others. But any time we went, my nan knew that I loved jelly and ice cream. So she would always have made a jelly, and she would always have some ice cream. And that ice cream would often be Neapolitan. So there's that deep-seated childhood memory there. Consequently, that meant I didn't like the second level as much because it was blue. What is blue? Blue bubblegum flavour? No. I do not understand blue bubblegum flavour. It's disgusting. It's ice cream for people who like root beer. I sort of get what it's going for, because it does taste like a certain type of bubblegum. It's just not what I want my ice cream to taste of. The other thing we have in this country, which I don't know if you do, it comes up in other places, is we have blue raspberry as well. And I have no idea of the logic behind that. Because raspberries aren't blue, and blue raspberry things don't taste anything like they're a raspberry either. So, God knows where that came from. Blue raspberry is one of those flavours where you can say it tastes like blue, because it does. Where are you going? Let me through there. There we go. Good. Actually, let's reset them. This has been an alarmingly solid attempt so far. No, don't take the risk. You know, if you take the risk, you will regret it. Took the risk there, and it paid off. For once. Right, now to escape. And move on to our second challenge. That's really awkward pacing. We're good though. We're good. Oh no, we might not be good. Cloak! That's exactly what it's for. So see, there's quite an escalation in difficulty between the first 2 levels on this. Uh-oh. Might be cloaking time again. There we go. Yeah, quite an escalation in difficulty over these first 2 levels. Which is fine, because as we saw, that first level takes quite a while to get through. Just might be a little bit of a shock to anyone expecting a slightly more gentle difficulty curve. Oh no! No, there was no getting out of that one. Yeah, I guess the 3 sub-mazes in each level have a gradual escalation in difficulty as well, so... So that's good. Oh, I don't like this. Let's let him go by and let's get this layer sorted. You'll notice that as well as the stuff moving faster on this level, there are also fewer gaps in the walls. Meaning that you've got fewer routes for escape in quite a few of the layers. So like this middle one, for example, there's just one doorway. So if you're not anywhere near that middle point and you need to get out of that lane, you are in trouble. But like we say, that's what the cloak is for. Okay, 2 mazes down. On to the third one. Now this one's a little bit nasty because you've got these enclosed areas that you have to be very careful not to get trapped in. Again, a bit of judicious use of cloak. And you'll be fine. Oh, that was too close for comfort. Actually, en route to an extra life at 8,000 points. Might be worth heading back to reset the frogs using the little trick I showed before. So just pop your head in there and then pop back out into the screen and they're back where they started. There we go. We can just shut him out like that. There's our extra life. And we're nearly done. Lovely stuff. So time for another cutscene. I'm aware this video has gone on for much longer than I perhaps intended, but we did spend 20 minutes reading a story at the start, so you know, like I say, you clicked on this video, and if you didn't skip that bit when I gave you the opportunity to, that's on you. Or if you listened to it, thanks. I enjoyed reading it. Right. It's challenge level 3. And this time we've got a slightly different shade of pink. Slightly more purple. And yeah, as I said before, you've got 6 frogs. Is that 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. 6 frogs to contend with. Which is ridiculous. No one can be expected to deal with that many frogs. And as you can probably see, that makes it a little bit more difficult to get them all bunched up in one place. Because as you probably noticed, they sort of interfere with each other a little bit as well. Because they can't move over each other. But we are getting 30 points a square now, which is lovely. Oh, this is not a good situation to be in. Run. Oh. How much longer can we last? And no, the answer is no longer until I accidentally press the option key. Alright, cloak. Okay, first maze done. That is a milestone. Okay, nice use of turnstile there. And escape. But yeah, you see we've got really speedy vehicles this time. But in exchange we do have a lot more in the way of passageways. Oh, accidentally rewound there. I'm just pressing all of the accidental buttons today. I've quit the bloody game, haven't I? It's not to be. Today is not to be. Oh, I apologise for that. That is my own cack-handedness. But anyway, hopefully that's given you... Well, I would hope an hour and 5 minutes of Preppie 2 has given you an idea of how it all works. And I hope you've had some fun along the way anyway. So, yes, mishaps aside, that's Preppie 2 from Russ Wetmore, which is a very fun game for Atari 8-bit that I often find myself revisiting. So, just remains for me to say, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.